Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Ad Hoc Community Benefits Procurement Committee. I'd like to do roll call, and then we'll proceed with the election of a committee chair and vice chair. When I call your name, please identify your presence. Councillor Galloway.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Jowett. Councillor Kiefer.
Present.
Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
And I'll call again for Councillor Harris. Sorry, Councillor Nowak. My apologies.
All right, present.
I'll call again for Councillor Harris and Councillor Jowett. So we have all members present with the exception of Councillor Harris and Jowett. We'll now move forward to the appointment of a chair for this committee, and I will call for nominations for the position of chair. If you'd like to nominate someone, please raise your hand to do so. Do we have a nomination for the position of chair? I'll count to 10 for the introverts. I'm not seeing that there is anyone who is looking to nominate a chair. Do we have any? Oh, Councillor Kiefer? Yes?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Strickland, if he accepts.
Thank you. Any other nominations for the position of chair? May I have a mover and seconder to close the nominations for this position? Councillor Strickland, do you accept the nomination of position of chair for this committee?
I will accept, but thanks to my nominator.
Sorry, you said you will accept?
I will accept, but thanks to my nominator. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. May I have a mover and seconder to close the nominations for the position of chair? Councillor Kiefer, did I see your hand earlier?
Yeah, that's correct.
And a seconder to close the nominations? Councillor Nowak? All those in favor? And that's carried. Congratulations, Councillor Strickland. You have been acclaimed as chair of the committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stevie. The enthusiasm was absolutely overwhelming.
I'd like to now call for nominations for the position of vice chair. Councillor Galloway?
In absentia, I'd like to nominate Councillor Harris.
Councillor Harris?
Well, I just joined, so my apologies. My wife called me about 10 times about something on the house, so my apologies for coming late. But sure, I'll accept.
Are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? May I have a mover and seconder to close the nominations for vice chair of the committee, please? Helen Jowett moves it, seconded by Tom Galloway. Thank you very much. All those in favor of closing nominations for vice chair? And that is carried. Michael Harris is acclaimed as vice chair of this committee.
That's quite a tandem. Councillor Strickland is chair and Harris is vice. That's a good one.
All right.
Yeah, we can. Never mind. I'll reserve my comments for later. Looking forward to working with you, Mike, and the team.
Absolutely, guys.
Chair Strickland, I turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much, Stevie. As you can likely tell, I'm having some technology problems this morning. I'm on my phone and I'm attempting to log in on my PC, but I run into this problem every now and again that it won't load or connect to the server. So I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I did review it. I seem to think we're going to start off with a presentation, aren't we? Are we going to have a presentation from Craig Dyer, or where are we at on the agenda? If someone can help me out, Stevie or Craig.
The next item on the agenda is calling for declarations of pecuniary interest. And then
Okay,
review
are there
of
any,
the terms
any
of
declarations
reference.
any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, okay. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject, just not that the agenda needs to be adjusted, but I have a hard stop at 10 after 11. So just, I'll be leaving.
Yeah, I'd like to get it done by 11 if we can, Councillor Galloway.
Well, whatever, but I just.
Okay, thanks for that. That's not a pecuniary interest, but certainly an interest. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we've appointed the chair. Review and approval of terms of reference. Is someone going to walk us through that? Do we have any comments on that?
I can say a few words, Chair Strickland, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dyer.
So through you, Mr. Chair, included on today's agenda is a draft terms of reference document. So just for reference, we use the terms of reference from the ad hoc, I think it was called the Economic Recovery Committee that you recall met a number of times over the course of the summer and early fall last year. We use that document as our guide. I think most of what's in the terms of reference is relatively straightforward. I would suggest that particular attention be focused on the I think what we've called either the scope or the purpose of the mandates. That would be part 3, where we go into a few paragraphs of description of the purpose of the committee, and that's probably the most important item for the group to consider today. Most of what else is in here is, let's say, administrative in nature, but certainly if there are any recommended changes, then certainly we'll make sure they're incorporated. And for your reference, we've included as an appendix to the terms of reference, the resolution that was passed by Regional Council back on April 21st, as reflected in the minutes of May 19th. So again, I think the key part of the terms of reference would be part 3. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Craig. I'm just wondering, are there any questions from the committee on the terms of reference? And maybe if you could just speak up, because I'm dealing with this technology problem right here. So are there any questions from members of the committee? No, I'm not hearing any. The one comment I would have, Mr. Dyer, and for the benefit of the committee, is number A, in terms of further to your comment around scope, the number A, like review and evaluate arrangements, initiatives, policies, and practices adopted by the 3 levels, that could be quite exhaustive. And we want to have some kind of report back according to the resolution in the fall of 2021. So I'm just assuming the expectation that for staff, Mr. Dyer, is not to review everything that's out there in Canada for community benefits, because that could be quite a task.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that this is one of the key items where some direction or guidance from the committee would be most helpful to staff. We'll need to figure out, I guess, an appropriate amount of of research and evaluation. And I guess the question for the committee is, how much information or background or explanation do you think you'd like to have? So if we think ahead to whenever the next meeting of this committee is, I could see us having some conversation just around what community benefit agreements and workforce development agreements are, the form that they take, where they're being used, some indication of how success or outcomes are being measured, in order to give this group some idea of where they might want to take this. And you're right, this could be there's I guess a wide range of time and effort that we can put into this. And if we had some guidance from the committee about your expectations, I think that would be very helpful for us.
Well, I would maybe suggest there's a couple of jurisdictions that have community benefit agreements in place already and subject to input from the committee. But, so there's Infrastructure Ontario, for example. There is the City of Toronto, City of Vancouver, City of Winnipeg. Other communities are looking at it. Vancouver and Toronto have it in place. There's also British Columbia, the province of British Columbia, and the province of Nova Scotia. So, and then there's various other government jurisdictions. The federal government is going through consultations now and through the summer on their rollout of community benefits. And just for the benefit of the committee, the federal government going forward is really focusing on procurement for infrastructure through what they're adopting is a triple bottom line approach. So environmental, economic, and social benefit of the projects. And as the social aspect, where workforce development and community benefits agreements are coming in, and they have various permutations of that. So, I would suggest to the, to benefit the community staff is that look at community benefit agreements and workforce development agreements where they're already operational. And I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. I'm seeing some heads nodding. You can use your raise a hand function now. I'm back online here. Thanks, everyone. All right, Tom.
Yeah, well, that seems like a logical thing to do, that we could actually look at these policies where they've pre-existed or have been existing, and to see what the implications are. And it would be good to find out where they exist, both in terms of those who support it and those who don't support it, what their experience has been. If those people can be identified, that is.
Right. Okay, that's good. So then I see Sophia. Sophia, sorry, I don't know you. So.
Hi, Councillor Strickland. I'm one of the advisors working in the equity unit.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, very nice to meet you, albeit virtually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was a member of the social procurement working group for the region. We last met in February of 2020, just before we closed for COVID. We have done an environmental scan on community benefits, so I can share some of that information. We've also brought in people from Toronto, Hamilton, and other places, other municipalities who are doing this work, to ask some questions, especially when we're looking at forming our housing master plan, to see how we can do some hirings for the BIPOC community. So we have done some of that work. I don't know if similar municipalities have social procurement units, but one of the questions I had wanted to ask when looking at the terms of reference was, how is this committee going to intersect with that, so we're not duplicating some of that work that's already been laid from the foundation?
Well, I think, Sophia, that social procurement, and we've had a discussion about this previously, social procurement is a much larger initiative of community benefits agreements. And so,
Yes.
our thinking was we would limit it in scope to community development, workforce development discussion, and then see where that leads us to that broader discussion of social procurement. And I know there's been much work done on social procurement, but I think the work that you've done, and I see Carolyn on the line as well, and I've had a conversation with Carolyn, but I think the work that you've done would certainly inform the deliberations of this committee and would be a good place to start. So, maybe as we're building the agenda for future meetings, I think a presentation of that work that you've done would be very well received. I would also add that, to the surprise, I'm sure, of some of our colleagues, is that on our latest RFPs for affordable housing, there was a community benefits component attached to that as well. Not prescriptive, but aspirational. So, we've started down this path a little bit at the region on the affordable housing side. Does that help, Sophia?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. And before I get to Councillor Nowak, Carolyn, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Strickland, and good morning, everyone. There was a working committee of regional staff to look at social procurement in the larger sense. Excuse me, but what we do have is some information from the City of Vancouver, because we did have the consultant that worked with them come and talk to us, and then we had another consultant that also worked with Peel on community benefits. So we have some of that work already. Ryan Pettipier is joining us today too. He's just in another meeting and he'll join a little later, but he can talk about the piece about the social housing and how we've included community benefits in his work too. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Nowak?
Yeah, I'm just looking for a little bit of clarity on this. In general terms, we're looking to find a percentage of maybe for lack of a better word, maybe a marginalized community that would be involved in the workforce when it comes to some of these major construction projects. But I'm wondering how that is broken down. Maybe staff will be addressing this at some point, but are we talking about individuals in engineering or strictly labor or administrative or apprenticeships? How is that percentage going to be broken down in that plan?
Well, Joe, I could.
Or do we know at this point?
Well, I would say we don't know, and the various models that are out there speak to that. For example, on the Eglinton Crosstown, which is one of the largest infrastructure projects in Canada, they started off with percentage targets from underrepresented groups for labor force, but then quickly realized that they needed to have a combination of professionals and labor force to provide more opportunities. So it was expanded to engineering, professional staff, labor, and also to some extent supply chain. So in Nova Scotia right now, for example, it's 100% labor force. So 25% need to be apprentices, and 10% of those apprentices need to be from underrepresented groups. You got to be careful how we characterize this, but broadly defined. So, what are underrepresented groups include women, veterans, Black, Indigenous people of color. So it's something that, is unique to different jurisdictions and how they decide to go forward on that.
So, yeah, no, and I understand that, and I'm assuming we'll get more information, as we progress with this. But so the other question, maybe a follow-up to that, is how do we make sure that, I don't know how to put this properly, but the talent pool is there to address those needs?
Yeah, and maybe, Carolyn, I don't profess to be a subject matter expert. I know a lot about this, but, in some jurisdictions, there is an analysis done of the availability of labor before large infrastructure projects into place. And so there needs to be certainly some outreach in the community around that. So there needs to be, it depends, one of the things that I'm thinking is, as we go down this path, it probably would likely, and I don't want to presuppose anything, but it probably would be best for us to start with a pilot project. and then from there see what kind of shape it'll take going forward, because each project is going to have its own unique capabilities and requirements, Joe. So that would be my thinking around that. But I think, as you know, as Carolyn and Sophia have mentioned, I think it'd be good for us to have this information. And I would also suggest, if the committee's interested, that we get some presentations from some of these jurisdictions, so we understand exactly how it works. We can learn from that. So we get the Toronto Community Benefits Network, we get BC, we get Vancouver, whatever makes sense, and we can have 2 or 3 presentations to help us better inform this discussion. We can also see the differences between the programs and what do we think would work best for the regional Waterloo. Does that help, Councillor Nowak?
Yeah, it does. It's going to be an interesting going forward. I was just thinking now we have, we have a $22 million project that's going to be happening out in our township over the next couple of years. It might be, not that we would be able to commit to anything, but it would be interesting to see how what you're planning to do would fit into a project like that, if you know what I mean. Just sort of as a template or an example of what could be done or what could be achieved.
Sure, and staff, I'm sure, would have some information on that. I think that that project would be an example of putting in some procurement requirements that can deliver some results along that line, Joel. But there's lots of best practices. I think the whole thing is you want to make sure this is set up for success. And the ones that have not succeeded are the ones that have reached too far too fast. So you got to weigh all the different options and get on the right path and make sure we set it up for success.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Thanks. You're welcome. Councillor Jowett.
Thanks, Chair Strickland. I was going to ask that, or maybe even suggest that we engaged Waterloo Wellington Training Board. I'm not really sure what their acronym is now, but they're continually collecting labor economics stats inclusive of demographics that could probably be critical in knowing some maybe unintended consequences or adverse impacts that Councillor Nowak is referring to. Is that something that we can make use of?
Yeah, I think labor market information has to be part of the input into the process, and particularly as you go on to larger scale projects, and Helen, I'll give you an example in British Columbia, but they're looking at very large projects in British Columbia. And so you do a profile of the trade requirements for a specific project, and you consult with the local labor force and see what kind of demand there is for that trade, and then how you can integrate folks from underrepresented groups, et cetera, into that specific trade. Like you don't want to go out and recruit 100 electricians for a job that only requires 30 electricians when there's ample supply of electricians in the local market. So it's a real balancing kind of act. Yeah, and that labor information is an important input for sure. Yeah. All right, Sophia.
Councillor Strickland, you spoke to some of the pieces I wanted to touch on, but in terms, I think it was Councillor Galloway that spoke about ensuring that we have the people that are qualified. Some things that in Toronto, based on the City of Toronto's procurement policy that we did with Toronto Housing, is if we didn't have skilled people in labor, for example, when we're doing our revitalization projects for our social housing, part of the contract would be it's either they're going to hire, or if we didn't have enough skilled people, they're going to give us training dollars to help skill people up. So that when we did the next project or next phase, we'd have people that are qualified to actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a key component of it for sure, Sophia. All right. So any other discussion on this? This is a good discussion to kick things off. There's no definitive answers on this. This is very, very progressive stuff that we're looking at here. So I'm wondering then, of the purpose of the mandate, Mr. Dyer asked for input on that, and I think that I don't know if we want to amend it or does staff take it under advisement, but I would suggest that based on our conversation, number A would include a more kind of comprehensive review of existing community benefit programs and workforce development programs that are operational right now within Canada. There's some in the U.S. as well. Actually, this whole thing started in the U.S. and California, but I think we'd focus it to Canada and those that are operational. I think there was an agreement from the group on that. Okay, and then the other thing was that we also wanted to hear from community leaders who are involved with community benefit programs in Canada as well, right? So there's the Toronto Community Benefit Network, there's BC and maybe Vancouver, maybe Nova Scotia. Those would possibly be before. Nova Scotia is the newest one that's operational right now. And then we also wanted to hear from staff. We wanted to see the results of the good work that staff have done on their environmental scan and also what they built into the procurement language for our recent affordable housing RFP. So I don't know if we need to change the terms of reference for all of that or that falls into the terms of reference. We just look at that as activities. Craig, what are your thoughts, Craig?
Well, my thoughts are that I think the discussion that the committee has just had aligns very well with the language that's in the terms of reference right now, right? So basically focusing on existing programs in Canada that are operational. And if I think ahead to the subsequent meeting, you know, I could envision us coming back with an outline, an overview of some of those programs, an overview of some of the work that's been done already related to this within the region of Waterloo, and potentially a guest speaker or two to provide some insight with respect to programs that are working in other jurisdictions. So my sense is that the wording aligns nicely with the conversation, but we're certainly in your hands if you'd like to see some edits.
All right, any input on that? Are we heading in the right direction here? All good on that? And Councillor Kiefer, I'd be happy to call on you when you raise your hand, but I am definitively ignoring that hat.
Well, you should cheer for them, you know.
I have my jersey in the closet with a rose on it, you know, like the English rose. I'm sure Mr. Dyer does too.
I know it well.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, Craig, to your point, I think it would be very beneficial for us to clearly state that we'd like to hear from a couple of folks who are running these programs in those jurisdictions. Right. So I think we really need to hear from some people who are running it.
Chair Strickland, it's Stevie.
Hey, Stevie.
I was just going to say that I've been taking notes as you've been speaking, and I can ensure that your comments are included in the minutes in terms of direction.
Okay, great. But I just thought, thank you, Stevie. I thought Craig said, you know, kind of possibly get some people in. I think we just definitively, we want to hear from some folks, right? People are nodding. Councillor Galloway?
Understood.
Yeah, I just want to repeat that I'm going to be particularly interested in hearing about those that like it and those that don't. You know, like I don't want to just hear from one or the other. I want to hear from both, and certainly interested also in terms of the associated diversity issues.
Yeah, well, I don't know if Councillor Harris is still on the call, but there's not unanimity in the contracting community around community benefits, that's for sure. So we can make sure we have a diversity of opinions. I think that's fair. Chair Redmond.
Thanks, Chair Strickland. I was just going to say, I would really hope that the presentations are done through a critical lens of lessons learned and things that they would do differently. Because I think that I would really like to see a focused intervention rather than this is what I did on my summer vacation. So I think we need to, I would like to hear sort of a critical analysis as well as what they did.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that would be part of it, because those programs that have been in place, they've, you know, I gave the example of Eglinton Crosstown. They've morphed as they've gone forward, and absolutely have learned best practices, and we want to learn from what they've done. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're all right with the terms of reference. We can approve the terms of reference, and staff have taken our direction. So can I have a mover and seconder for the terms of reference? Councillor Kiefer, Councillor Nowak, all those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Committee timeline and meeting frequency. So, you know, I think the resolution says get this back by the fall, right? It said September. So we're probably looking at late September. I would suggest we need probably 2 meetings between now and then. We can get it done. 1 meeting to hear and get some input from staff and external agents. And then another meeting to decide on our path forward. Does that make sense? Yeah, people are nodding. Mr. Dyer?
Yes, I wonder if I could make a suggestion. You know, we certainly haven't developed you know, a detailed timeline just yet, but one thing that I was thinking about was so the next meeting, if the next meeting was focused on, let's say, you know, education and information, right? Finding out about what's working well in other areas, who's doing what's in place. That's going to be a fair bit of material. And then as we set out in the terms of reference, there will likely be the need for some let's call it consultation with a variety of groups within the region, whether it's workforce planning board, construction associations, you know, any other organization that might have a view, you know, either positive or negative, with respect to community benefits agreements. My sense is that we'll need to go through both of those processes in order to then bring back to the committee a recommendation on how to proceed. So just my sense is that it's probably 3 meetings that we need before we're in a position to say, here's how we want to do this. I'm just saying that all that off my head without having discussed it with any of my colleagues. So apologize if I'm way off base.
No, I you know, I think that makes an abundance of sense. The only thing we're not going to hit the September timeline probably.
I don't think so, Mr. Chair. And just, you know, I should say, you know, certainly from a procurement perspective, still extremely focused on vaccine distribution. So we need to, we'll need to manage our resources accordingly.
Yeah. So maybe we'll just, you know, work out you know, the planned meeting schedule and then see what works. And then if we have to go back to council and just give an update that it's going to be longer than what the original resolution said, I think we could do that. I'm just also wondering, and, you know, like to get some input from committee members, stakeholder engagement. Do we schedule another public meeting as part of those 3 meetings? And or, you know, do we schedule a public meeting based on what we've come up with as a recommendation? You know, Chair Redmond?
Sean, you just said where I was going to go. I really think that if we go back to the community, it should be, here are our findings or here's our recommendation rather than just input. I think we unsolicited got a lot of input, and I think people are pretty entrenched in their views. So I would rather be able to discuss the merits of something we're considering as opposed to what previously held opinions already are.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. Yeah. Okay, are we in agreement with that? So 3 meetings, including a public meeting between now and October-ish, depending on a few variables out of our control.
Yep.
Okay.
I think,
All
Mr.
right.
Chair, that gives us enough
Yep.
to work with to draft up a timeline and share it with the committee.
Okay, great. And then Craig and Bruce and I saw Lisa on the phone call as well. I don't know if Lisa's still there, but I'm just wondering, and I don't want to go too far down the road here, but if we were to do a pilot project, for example, Joe talked about his arena project, which is probably under the tender process right now for the township. But if we were to do, I just want to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity for more than a roads project, like an ICI. So I'm thinking the King Victoria Transit Hub, for example, or I'm not sure what's all in our capital budget going forward, but I just want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity for a perfect project if we decide to do a pilot program.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like community benefits work best for like buildings. They don't work so well for roads.
Right.
Mr. Chair, through you, would you be okay if we take a look?
Sorry, Bruce, you got cut off there.
Would you be okay, Mr. Chair, if we take a look at that and bring it back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be something that would probably for that information sharing would be good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so committee timeline, meeting frequency, we got a plan there? Oh, Chair Redmond?
10 years from now, I'm still going to be doing
Oh.
Bruce is back echoing in the chamber. You know what? I think it's a really good suggestion that we look at possible projects, but I would throw a little bit of caution there that we don't want a bunch of people on either side of this discussion to get all ramped up thinking we're doing something. So I think that next piece is an important piece farther on in the discussion and the timing, but I guess I just would be worried that because it's public, people will jump to conclusions that may or may not be borne out.
Fair enough. I know we got to manage that. We got to manage that process for sure. But I think it's at least worthwhile, Chair Redmond, for staff to have a look at it. Yeah, but I hear you. All right, Sophia?
Councillor Chair, I just wanted to know, once the timelines have been ironed out, who do I coordinate with around getting some speakers in?
So, Mr. Chair, perhaps I can help out with that. I think given the instructions and discussion we've received today, we'll get the internal staff team together and work out what our next steps are and who needs to do what.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Anything else? We've got the terms of reference, we've got committee timeline and meeting frequency. I really appreciate everyone volunteering to sit on this committee. I thank you very much for that. Any other business? No other business? Other than Go England Go meeting? We'll motion to adjourn. Chair Redmond, Councillor Kiefer. Okay, great. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day. Stay cool out there. Great meeting. Thanks.